All right, let's jump right in. When you think about your job, you've got your duties, your salary, maybe the people you work with, but running underneath all of that, there's this invisible set of rules, a kind of operating system that shapes your entire working life. Today, we're going to open up that rule book and take a look inside South African labor law.
So, let me start by asking you this. Is a job just a simple agreement? A straightforward handshake deal between you and your boss? For a long time, the law pretty much said, yep, that's it. But as we're about to see, the real story is, well, it's a whole lot more complicated than that.
You see, labor law is really split into two different worlds. On one side, you've got the individual stuff. That's all about you and your employer, your personal contract, your pay, your one-on-one relationship. But then there's this whole other side, the collective world. This is where group power comes into play. We're talking trade unions, strikes, and massive agreements that cover entire industries. Both are super important, but they work in very different ways.
Now, to really get why we have the system we do today, we actually have to take a step back in time. We need to look at how things used to be and the huge imbalance that the old way of thinking created.
The old school approach was governed by what's called common law. And the idea was pretty simple. A job was just a private contract, no different from any other deal. It was just two parties, you and an employer, voluntarily agreeing to terms. The law didn't see any need to get involved beyond that.
And this is where the whole idea starts to fall apart. The law treated the employment contract as a deal between equals. But think about it. Is one person looking for a job really on an equal footing with a giant corporation?
This quote just nails it, doesn't it? The entire common law system was built on an assumption that just wasn't true in the real world. In most cases, the power is tilted, and it's tilted heavily towards the employer, which leaves the individual employee in a really tough spot.
And this wasn't just some abstract legal theory. This power imbalance had serious, real-world consequences. Without specific protections, people could find themselves stuck with harsh working conditions, crazy long hours, and almost no benefits or leave. Because what was the alternative? No job at all.
But then, here in South Africa, a massive shift happened. Something that would completely rewrite the rulebook for the world of work.
And that huge change came from the highest law in the entire country, the Constitution. It didn't just tweak the old rules. It laid a completely new foundation.
This is the moment everything pivots. Your job stopped being just a private matter and became a fundamental human right. The Constitution introduced a brand new principle that would override everything that came before it. Just look at this one sentence from Section 23. It might sound simple, but that line is the absolute bedrock of all modern South African labor law. It's not just about what you signed in a contract anymore. Now, fairness is a constitutional right, and that changed everything.
So with this new foundation in place, a much more complex and protective system began to take shape. Let's break down how today's labor law hierarchy actually works.
Okay, so this brings up a really practical question, right? You've got the Constitution, you've got specific laws, you've got union agreements, and then you have your own personal contract. If they say different things, which one are you supposed to follow?
Well, thankfully, there's a clear pecking order. At the very top, the absolute king of the hill is the Constitution. Nothing can go against it. Right below that, you have legislation. Things like the Labor Relations Act that spell out all the details. Then come the collective agreements from unions. Then, your individual contract. And way down at the bottom, the last resort is the old common law. And here's the golden rule to remember. Whichever rule gives the employee more protection, that's usually the one that wins.
So, it's great to have all these rights on paper. But what do you do when things actually go wrong? Where can you go for help if you can't afford an expensive lawyer?
This is where the CCMA comes in. And honestly, this is a hugely important organization. It was set up to be an independent referee for labor disputes, one that's accessible, fair, and effective. The main goal is to solve problems and keep the peace in the workplace.
So what does the CCMA actually do on the ground? Well, its functions are all about providing real, practical solutions. First, they try to get everybody in a room to talk and find some common ground. That's called conciliation. If that doesn't work, they can step in as a kind of judge and make a final, legally binding decision. That's arbitration. On top of that, they give people advice on their rights, provide training, and help get those big collective union agreements sorted out. You could say it's the engine room that makes the whole system work.
Okay, let's zoom out for a second. After going through all of this, we have to ask the big question. Why does any of this really matter? What's the end goal of this whole complicated system?
You see, it's about so much more than just who wins an argument at work. A strong labor law system is designed to promote social justice by fixing that old power imbalance. It protects the fundamental rights that are now guaranteed in the Constitution. And by having clear rules and ways to solve problems, it actually helps create economic stability and industrial peace for the whole country.
Which brings us full circle. A job is obviously way more than just a simple contract. But that leaves us with one last thing to think about. Is labor law just a bunch of complicated rules we have to follow, or is it something much bigger? Is it maybe the very foundation on which we're trying to build a fairer and more just society for everyone?